Barney Taylor. Welcome back to In the Record Room. And today I'm delighted to be joined by DJ, dancer and collector Joe Moran. Joe, thanks ever so much for agreeing to come along today. How are you?
Great. Good to be here, Bernie. You know, I'm a media whore, so I pop up all over the place. As I was described years ago, I'm like the gay born of the mod scene. I was always on television and bits and pieces.
Well,
but anyway, it's great to be here.
Thank you very much. I was Googling you this morning, and there's some stuff on YouTube where you're being interviewed in 2013, I think. There's lots of stuff that you do, and I think it's really interesting. What I would like us to do is think about the three records you've chosen. But, you know, I think the last time we had a conversation, we were standing on the edge of the D8 dance floor, and I think we were just kind of chatting about music and other bits and pieces. And so I'm thrilled that we're getting this chance, even under these strange circumstances, to chat about these things. So I know for a fact that you have been intimately related to the modern soul scene for a really long time. So perhaps you might just tell me, how did you get started? What brought you to where you are now?
Well, I mean, for more years than I care to remember would be probably the subtitle here. Really, I think, you know, guys of our age, guys and girls of our ages, when we were growing up, you had a couple of things that you could do when you were a kid. You could, you know, do a sport. You could play an instrument and join a band, or you could just listen to music. You know, now I'm extremely lazy, so I don't do sport. I'm very uncreative with respect to musical instruments. I just don't do that. So really, the only thing I could do was what was music, was to listen to music, was to play music. And as a teenager, and that my two elder brothers, they were in bands. They were sportsmen as well, funnily enough. But they were also heavily into music, and they were into the likes of the early punk days, the power pop days, the new wave. And it was really through listening to their stuff, the Jam especially. All Mod Cons was an album that I just totally flipped over, you know. Looking at the inside with the Rotman cigarettes, with the Disc-a-Ska book, with the schematic for a scooter and stuff like that. And that kind of started me off. So I was always playing records. A friend of mine, he used to be a mod back in the old days. When we were really young, we did a DJ set for kids in the local U club.
Oh, excellent.
And well, so I brought down a load of punk, you know, The Fall, The Cure, The Ruts, all that sort of stuff, and started playing it, and there was murder in the U club over it. But that's what I wanted to do, and I always got interested in playing records. Wanted to play records, and then when I, you know, got into the mod scene, and being a little moddy boy and stuff like that, and getting to know people, and it was a way of kind of getting yourself out there. You know, hey, I've got a few records, can I do a set? I think one of the first sets I did was at the Change the World All There back in 1984.
Where was
maybe
that?
In the CIE hall.
Okay.
It was an old sort of a social club for the CIE workers there on Marlborough Street, and it had this beautiful dance floor with a balcony that swept up, and a little cafe area, but a real 50s, 60s Irish vibe off it. And Jimmy Green, I think, ran it. Robbie McDonald was involved in that, and I played a set of, believe it or not, modern jazz and British R&B, John Mayall, Peter Green, stuff like that, Clapton and whatever. And I was playing that for a while, got a couple of gigs here and there, and then like everybody else with Bubbles and that, heard Northern Soul music was even popular soul music at the time I would have had a liking for. But hearing the Northern sound really grabbed me, and then I kind of dropped the jazz and I dropped the R&B, and just focused then solely on soul music.
Did you combine sets? So, like when you're describing the Jam and the early power pop stuff, I mean, everybody looked at the chords and the Purple Hearts and that kind of stuff. It never did anything for me. I couldn't engage with that. And then, you know, the novelty hits like Poison Ivy, the Lambrettas or whatever it was, that was nothing for me really. But like yourself, it was the soul that really I found.
I think the revival stuff and the new wave. So, you know, that was I've never really played any of that stuff. Played the odd here and there in later years, but at the time, it was the music. That sort of music was part of the scene. It was what I listened to. I would have listened to it. I would have heard it. I would have gone to gigs where these type of bands were playing. But when it came to me standing behind the Technics or the Citronics, as it was then, we would. That's where I'd be playing. I'd be playing soul music. At the time, you know, being just, so this would have been all around about the time I would have been still in school and just about to leave school. Didn't do well in my final exams, so I ended up on the dole. So money was tight. I didn't come from a rich family. My dad's a tradesman, mother was a housewife, 6 kids, so there wasn't a lot of money to be floating around. So it was clothes, music, fags, bills. So when I wanted to buy a record, you know, invariably it was a bootleg, a reissue, or a cheapie. So I'd rather buy one of those in the soul area than to buy something by the Small World or the Scene or the Chords or something like that. So it was kind of a selective thing that we had to do based upon our economic circumstances. And like yourself, I enjoyed it, the music, but it didn't grab me. It didn't have the same sort of, my God, what was that song?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be perhaps a little bit controversial. For me, it was a little bit kind of ersatz. It was a little bit trying too hard to be authentic when it wasn't quite. I don't know whether that was the mix or whatever it was. I mean, the team beats were big in Hastings where I grew up, because Huggy Lever, I think all the team beats came from Hastings. And it was never like yourself. I mean, there's just no comparison. You go back to something when you first hear soul, and it doesn't ever stop you from kind of looking for more soul. But with a lot of these other records, you kind of stop chasing them or pursuing them, I think.
And I think that period, you know, the 80s period, and certainly it happened in Dublin, is that you had almost an emulation of what the London scene was like in the early 60s. So when the mod thing broke in Dublin, it was Quadrophenia, it was scooters with mirrors, it was, as you say, the Jam and Secret Affair and all that bombastic type stuff. And then as the years went on, it kind of evolved. Some of us evolved from being moddy boys into looking back a little bit further and going, you know, it's not all green flight jackets, great stay pressed, and bowling shoes, you know, and starting to look back sartorially, from a fashion point of view, but also musically. So we looked at the Jam. We looked at, you know, what as well are putting this is ska. What is this ska stuff? You know, let's go and find out what that is. And doing all that, and all those references that we were picking up from the Barnes book mods, from clippings in the papers, from seeing fellas on the scene dancing and looking, you know, his trousers, his top, or this, or that. You know what I mean? So we were picking up little clues, and I think, you know, our ears were picking up little clues as well, little riffs or whatever. Where did that come from? Hearing early Rolling Stone stuff and going, hang on a minute, I heard that. That's a Slim Harpo track, or that a Bo Diddley track, or, you know, Marvin Gaye. What was Marvin doing in 62, 63? So it was a sort of an I won't say an evolution, but more of a sort of a devolution back to an earlier stage. And I think fashion and music for us was very much like that. So to come back in that very circuitous route to the music and the 80s music, I think we had to go back. We heard it, it was great, but we wanted to know what they were playing, and we went back and we heard what they were listening to, and that's where the whole, for me anyway, the whole 60s soul journey began. You know, where they listen to, and this is where we need to be.
I think it's interesting because there were the two things that came simultaneously. There was the going back and looking for the soul, and then a big album that myself and my friends all listened to was the Intensified albums that came out as well. There's suddenly everybody got James Bond and all of that kind of stuff. And so those two, they're not divergent paths. I mean, we're not here to talk about ska today, but they were the two things that myself and all of my friends found from going as you say, devolving backwards. And then we stopped being mods quite quickly. And it just, I mean, lots of my friends became psychobillies and scooter boys and things because it was a fascinating thing because they found rockabilly and then all of this kind of stuff. But the soul thing never goes away, does it? It never goes.
I think once it's an odd thing. It's not like well, I suppose all musical forms are like that. Once they have their adherents, you know, you grow up, you get married, you have a mortgage, you have kids, you do all that sort of adult stuff, and you've always got in the back of your mind, you've always got, you know, whether you're a rocker or a psychobilly or a punk or a mod or whatever, you've always got that remembrance and fondness for the musical form. But with the soul thing, it's really odd because it's a devotion, if that's the correct word.
I think it is.
I suppose devotion kind of implies a sort of an almost, I suppose that's right. You can't, your devotion to it is, you can't but be into the music, you know, you can't but be there, and it's all encompassing. It's, I want to buy the records. I want to hear the records. I want to play the records. I want to dance to the records. I want to look at them, feel them, touch them, smell them. It becomes part of your fiber, I think.
Yeah, I think
most DJs, most collectors would say that it's not just the record. It's the whole world around the records. You know, I mean, like there's records there that are, you know, historical artifacts. But it's the music on them, it's what they mean, it's where they came from. All that whole sort of idea sits behind them, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lovely way of looking at it, because it's the relationship between the physical and the emotional, isn't it? You hold this thing in your hands. Every time you look at it, you remember when you bought it, the first time you played it, the last time you danced to it. And then, I mean, the other thing that's interesting is with soul, there's a lot of wonderful new soul out as well. It keeps reinventing itself. There's some great, the Coal Mine record label and these kind of things. There's some beautiful stuff around, which I think can fit seamlessly into a set with some of the older stuff as well. You don't have to just have limited by decade.
Well, that's the great thing about the current scene, you know. So I've done some writing about the current musical output with Coal Mine, with Timian, Kimberlite Records, Cannonball Records, even from a modern perspective, you know. And we've come into a golden age again, but maybe not the golden age, but a golden age.
Yeah, I think so.
Whereby the standard of soul music that's being produced now, in my opinion, is of a quality that we saw from the Motowns, from the Stax, from the Indies in Chicago and Detroit, etc., etc. It's not exactly the same, but the world has moved on. It's 50 years later. But you have the likes of Kelly Finnegan, Duran Jones and his crew, all those sort of guys. They're producing absolutely fantastic music.
They are.
You know, the Coal Mine guys, they've not put out a dud record in my mind. Now, I don't like every single one of them because some of them are not, you know, pressing the buttons for me. But looking at it objectively, from a quality, a soul point of view, those guys hit it every single time.
Absolutely. I think also importantly, it's not pastiche. It's not imitation. It's not like Wham covering a soul song, that kind of thing where they were always doing it knowingly. This is genuine intervention in a history, isn't it? And a continuation of a tradition, I think. And that's very, very important.
You can see and you can hear very, very quickly the difference between a group who are trying to recreate the sound, and then you have another group who want to recreate the atmosphere, the feeling, the emotion, the whole expression of thought that goes with that. And they're two very different beasts. The first one is, in my mind, you know, wedding bands. The second one are artists. So the likes of Kelly Finnegan. Kelly Finnegan doesn't sound like anybody. He sounds like Kelly Finnegan. The Monophonics sound like the Monophonics. You know? And I think that's an important difference. And certainly that's how I would come at it. So I'd very, very quickly, when I hear a song or hear the track or an artist or whatever the case may be, I'll very, very quickly have that in my mind. This is the break point for me. Is it parody or pastiche or wedding band? or is it artistic? Is it worthy of my time? Boom. If I'm on the second one, well, then I'll buy it, and I'll enthuse on it, you know.
Yeah, and of course, as you say, you write on it because you've been blogging about this stuff for a long time now, haven't you? And it's I think that's part of the devotion, which is actually taking your interest and using it as a platform for your own creativity. In your sense, is writing about it and all of these other things that you do, which I think is how it also continues, because that's how records are not forgotten or ideas are circulated. And with social media and the opportunities for sharing something as basic as a blog post via a URL, we can still continue these conversations like we're having today. I mean, and I think that's the beauty of soul as well.
Yeah, I think really the whole blog, the whole blog thing came about was because, you know, as a kid, as I said earlier, I don't do sport and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, one of my big things was reading voraciously. I used to read the back of the cornflakes packet every single morning, you know, that because I'd have to be looking at words to read. So I began to kind of express myself either in poetry or prose or whatever the case may be, and that quickly fell by the by. You know, the teen angst sounds odd when you're 25. You know,
look, we all have.
You're a writer.
I still have it now. Sometimes you get flashbacks. I'm like, ah.
So, you know. So I've always been writing, you know. Back in the 90s, I used to run a small little fanzine that I used to hand out at soul clubs and stuff like that. Very, very small, amateurish type thing, but it gave me the outlet to write about records, you know. And then I used to do some stuff for an Italian magazine. I used to write a column for them. So the blog thing was an adjunct to the magazine that myself and Ray used to do. What I needed to do, I was buying so many records, and I wasn't getting the chance to play them because I wasn't doing too many Northern gigs anyway. But I also I was just piling them up. I was just ending up with 20 records that I would have to go up to my record room, sit down, actually play them, so they could say, play them. You know, I would have heard them before. But I was saying to people, oh, I have this Benjamin and the Dreamers track. Have you heard it? No, I haven't heard it. Oh, it's really good. I just said, look, I'll just start writing about it. Throw up a few words, throw up a self sample. There you go. People have a look at it. If you want to hear it, cool. If you want to go to the blog, go to the blog. If you don't. I mean, I'll still do it. I know I've had a bit of a hiatus at the minute due to current circumstances.
It happens.
But you know, it'll get back there. I've got a list. I've got a list. I've got a box of records that I've not reviewed and stuck up on the blog. So I need to do that soon.
Look, we're under so much pressure because there's so many tools for communication that actually, if you want to use them, you can feel something. There's almost too much. But I think what you do, which is very interesting, is you're actually mapping a landscape in many ways, and you're actually charting that territory for yourself and for other people. Maybe that's a clumsy segue, but why don't we talk about the first record? Because obviously, as you know, I asked you to choose 3 records. So, Joe, what's the first one you've chosen? And
so, when you first asked me, I thought, you know, 3 records. How do you get through that lot to get to 3 records? And then I kind of had to, you know, sit back and did my normal job is fixing things, fixing software problems and fixing client problems and stuff like that. So, you know, the easiest way I thought, well, what do I constantly play when I come into this room? And what has been, I suppose, where will my influences come from around playlists? You know, so I think the first one that I picked out is by Joyce Kennedy on Blue Rock. I'm a Good Girl. I don't know whether you can see that one.
I can. I love the fact of just seeing something, just holding up a record is amazing.
Well, and isn't that the great thing that you can kind of do that? You know, you can't do that with an MP3. That's just us old people talking. But anyway, so what and why I picked that, I'm a Good Girl. It's not a traditional sounding Northern track, so it's quite disjointed. It has almost a throwback sound to it. I think it was 66. I think was the year on it.
But
it has a kind of an earlier, I won't say blues, but it has that stop-starty type feeling about it, which is great. And that's the kind of, when you have that whole night of Northern, of 60 soul, that lovely polished 60 soul, and you throw something like this in, it breaks it up. Very hard to dance to.
Yeah.
The chorus is a nice little break, but the rest is, it's a hard one to dance to.
Yeah.
But one of the main reasons I picked it is because I first heard it played by a guy called Mark Bourne.
Okay.
Mark died on the 11th of March. He died of problems with his lungs. Wasn't COVID, but he was the kind of the guru that to a lot of us. Because he was finding so many records, tracks. He wasn't buying most of them, but he was getting them from, I don't know where he was getting them, and putting cassettes together and sending them to people. Yeah. And he was just, Mark was Mr. Soul as far as I'm concerned. He was the one person that, if you're going to put a statue up to anybody on the Dublin South scene, it'd be Mark Bourne. His influence echoes down through the years, even to this day. So he put that on a tape for me, in amongst 50 other tracks or 20, whatever it was. And every single one of them were Stafford top of the world classics or big Northern tracks. Were really, really good. But that one was, I guess that was one of the first kind of expensive records I bought. Yeah. Up to then, as I said before, the economic straitened times we were in, we didn't have that much money. A £40 record was a week's wages.
Absolutely.
It would have been the money that I had for the whole week. So so to buy that was a lot of should I, shouldn't I, will I, won't. Is it that good? And that whole psychological, the tyranny of choice when you have a lot of money and you have a load of things you can buy. Did I buy the right one, etc., etc. So that was a great record. I very rarely play it out.
I was going to ask it when you play it. When was the last time you did play it?
The last time I played this was down in Pouch City. Not the last gig I did with the Pow Boys, but the one before that I had done. It was really funny. Getting ready for the gig, and it's always a fractious time. You know yourself. Will I play this? Will I play that? Again, it's the tyranny of choice. Am I selecting the right record? Yeah. And I noticed when I start piling up or putting the records in the box, this is what I'm going to bring. Yeah. It was all girl vocals. So I thought, hang on, that's interesting what I'm doing here. Unconsciously, I just ended up reloading here. Maybe it was just the frame of mind I was in. Yeah. So just, okay, leave the boys to the side. They're always on. Let me see what I can do with sort of affirmative action in the playlist. And anyway, and that was one of them there. Brilliant. And the next one that I talk about was also on that same playlist.
Well, then let's keep moving. Thank you.
Yeah. So this one is possibly one of my favorite girl vocals. It's Maxine Brown. Lovely. Let Me Give You My Loving.
I just love the label. One just looks so beautiful when you see a single with that label on it, and you kind of it's reckless to say maybe that labels are a hallmark of quality, because you don't always get something good from the same label. But Maxine Brown on one, I'm imagining, is just, I know where you are with this. So tell me about why you chose it.
I mean, somebody once said that it's a Motown record without being Motown, and it's not. I don't think it has any sort of connection to Motown, even sonically or in the arrangement or anything like that. Yeah, the arrangement was just by a guy called Lenny Glover, who or Leroy Glover, who he's just one of the arrangers from the New York, from the East Coast back in the 60s. Yeah, who worked on everything. Robin Rice, I've Had It on Crackerjack. He arranged that as well. But he's just everywhere. If you go to Discogs, look up the guy. He's everywhere. He did that. Yeah. But the arrangement on this is I think really why I like it is, with a lot of songs you get a start, a middle, crescendo, end. Yeah. With this one, it takes you start, middle, and it builds up into that middle, and it sort of dangles on that middle all the way to the end without hitting a crescendo, and it's almost like you're just about to and then boom, it goes down. But the arrangements on it, the production values on it are amazing. There's strings, it's just wonderful soundscape that's created. Typical New York brill building arrangements and productions and that. And of course, Maxine Brown, voice like chocolate velvet. If it's silk chocolate velvet, I don't know how many smooth things I can get in there. Saw her at Cleethorpes back in 86, 87 or something.
Wow. Okay.
I'm not a man. I don't like gigs. I don't like, because I like the record. So whenever I hear a gig, the music is never the same. I'd say that about every gig, and it's always great. But
I'm probably the same. I think.
Gigs. And she came on the stage, and gobsmacked is the only word. Absolutely gobsmacked. She just destroyed the place. She was amazing. So, you know, that for me is the pinnacle of girly sounds. Is it the best girly sound I've ever heard? Probably not, but there's just something about it that grabs me particularly. And when I hear it and when I play it out on a big system, it's one of these. It's arms in the air. It's emotion that you're trying to channel. So that's great. And the cheap one as well.
Oh, this is the thing, you see. I mean, going back to this idea that soul has to be expensive. I mean, you do just find that you can just play things that actually, as you say, are cheap or that are reasonably common. But if you find the right time to play it, then it's absolutely, you know, D8, we've been lucky. People have dropped some really big records, and that's really interesting. But everybody who plays at D8 will always say, but that's not what it's about. It's about finding cheapies as well. It's not about me having my $8,000 records or whatever.
I think you've got two type of DJs. You've got Billy Big Balls, and you've got Party Boy. Okay, so Billy Big Balls walks up behind the decks, has a box of £1,000 records, and puts them on one after the other. Boom, 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 boom. Look how big my balls are. This is what I'm playing. You know, very easy thing to do. You just need a big wallet. Very easy thing to do. The second point, Party Boy. John Dunn being a prime example of this. And I think a lot of the Irish DJs operate in this fashion as well. That they do a 1 hour set at a club, and they probably spend about 4 times that amount sitting down in their record rooms, taking out their first record, putting it on, listening to it. What follows that? Where am I taking these people? I want to take them on a journey. So we start off here and we end over there, and they bring them up and down, and I think that's where a DJ's experience and understanding of the form and the music comes into it. So you say, starts off with £1,000 record. The next record he's playing is immaterial of the price of it. It fits that mood. It clicks in here, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And that's what dance floors are all about. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people like Butch, 80, Mick Smith, big names that play £1,000 records, and they play fabulous sets. Fabulous sets. That's fine. But I think, you know, the guys who actually go out, find records, irrespective of the price, whether it's £1,000 or £5 or whatever, but know how to put them together. The Party Boys, that's where I want to be. They're the guys I want to hear and want to be in the same room as when they're working.
No, I think I'm the same as you. I mean, you can tell when people are just showing off with stuff. And actually, that's one of the things I've found. I mean, one of the beauties of getting involved in the Irish soul scene is I've met so many DJs and collectors, and everybody's so modest. I very rarely have I met people that boast about what they've got and you wait till you hear this. Everybody's just they play it down, because I think absolutely a lot of people understand it's not about them anyway. It's about people on the dance floor. So I think it's a very interesting kind of.
And I think Irish people naturally are self-effacing, self-deprecating, if you will, in a sort of a snobbish way, you know, oh, stop, I'm terrible, but tell me I'm great. You know, there is a bit of that in there. But I think, you know, our focus has always been about the night, about this communal thing that we're doing. It's, you know, I've done gigs where it's cost me money to do them.
Yeah.
But I knew that if I did them, if I was there playing records, I would bring something to that everybody else would have a good time as well.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not about the money. The finances, it's great to get a few bob in your pocket. You can get a taxi home, a few points, happy days, you know. But it's about that communal thing. It's about us all in the room doing what we do. And on that point, a nice little segue. You know, one of the certainly, I have to, before I even show you this, I have to say this is not an original. So I don't want anybody writing in and go, yeah, it's not an original. So and it's good because I'll never play this out. Because I love dancing to it. So if I played it, I couldn't dance to it. So it's on the Contempo label, which was done for the Northern market, the English Northern market, and the Montclairs. The Montclairs hung up on your love. I've been told that there are differences between the Contempo arrangement and the Paula original arrangement.
Right.
To be honest, I wouldn't know the difference. I don't know the difference. They all sound the same to me, but it's the funeral record. It's the one that would be played at the service, and it would be the one that I'll go in. Actually, I won't be having the service. I'm an atheist, but anyway, at my going away, and this should be going into the coffin with me. What can I say about it? 1973. So for a 60s head like me, it's like, hey, one of your favorite records in the 70s. But it's just, I don't know. I mean, you hear the bass at the start, and it's like a clarion call. It's stand to attention. It's get in here, you know, get onto that dance floor, listen to it, and it just shakes your whole rib cage, your heart, boom, 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 you know. And Phil Perry singing on it is just sublime.
Yeah, I think there are just moments, and I think that's where this sense of community that you're describing, and that obviously you and lots of other people have worked very hard to maintain over the years. And it's a community that's been very welcoming to people like me who've only recently become part of it. I think part of that sense of community is the sharing of the bass lines, or those moments, the breaks, when you were describing the Maxine Brown, the journey that 60 people on a dance floor are taken for 3 minutes and then are left. And then the skillful DJs you're describing, they've already worked out that the next one is going to keep that journey, that community together. And I think that's, so your description of these records and why you chose them, I just think it just reaffirms to me how small bits of vinyl are actually the things that keep diverse people together, because we're all different. We may share some similarities, but the beauty of that 3 minutes of shared experience, and then when you hear a record that you haven't heard before, did you hear that? Do you remember? All of those things are where we go, and it takes us back to being a teenager and brings us to where we are today, I think, Joe. I mean, that's
exactly. And they're records, you know. Vinyl is what they're made of, but they're records. They're a recording of a particular time in history, whether it's, you know, the artists who produce it, the whole flowering of pride in Black America, the ownership of their own destiny. It's a recording of when you first heard it, of at this scooter rally, at this nightclub, at this person's house, or whatever. So you say it's a tribal thing, and it evokes those memories and it pulls you back in. And I think from a collector's point of view, you know, even if I wasn't a DJ, even if I wasn't somebody who played music out every now and again, I would still want to collect them, because I like looking at them as an artifact. I like the design. I like what they mean and what they meant to people at the time. And then I'm a middle-aged man. All we do is collect, you know.
It's true. I get into trouble all the time for collecting. I've stopped collecting books, for example, because I just can't do it anymore. There's just too many books in the world. But I mean, I don't know what I love about these things as well is I love the strange little bits of chance, like you might see a name scribbled on the middle of a 45. For some people that's defacing it, but for me that adds to the personal memory of whatever that 45 is. I find it quite fascinating if you see Gary written on it, and then you think, well, who was Gary, and how did he get the record, you know? And I think that's part of this, because we're curious people, Joe, aren't we? I think.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, because I once actually bought an album in a junk shop that used to belong to my auntie's friend. Believe it or not, she had her name written on the back, and I noticed that it was Cabra. and it was an old MFP, music for pleasure, Motown-y thing.
Yeah,
Remember those?
yeah.
And I just noticed the name, and talking in the house, I just mentioned to me, Ma, oh Ma, do you know the O'Briens or whatever the name was from such and such a road in Carbury? She goes, oh yeah, she used to hang around with your Auntie Josephine. Which is no way. Pulled it out, there you go. She goes, yeah, I remember that girl. So yeah, a little bit of history stuck on the side of it, and you can't get that with an MP3, you know.
No, you can't. It's like finding an acknowledgement in the front of a book that was given as a birthday present in 1976. I think there's something beautiful about that, and there's something that I think. I mean, you were talking at the start about the fact of the artifact. There's no substitute for actually having this thing in your hand, holding it up, nursing it, because we have to be careful with these things. They're fragile, they're delicate, you know, and that gives them an additional quality, I think, that we care for them, physically care for them, as well as emotionally care for them.
Yeah, you know, I think this is going to sound really, really pseudo-intellectual, but I think we as custodians of these things, need to be careful what happens to them. Now, you know, forget about the artificial value that we as Northern Soul, 60 Soul collectors put on them.
Yeah.
But from a historical value, you know, you pick up a record that was probably made in Chicago by the stereotypical three guys going into a recording booth, recording the record, and putting it out there, and you know, not actually making a go of the music scene, but for that brief moment in time, it's a window into the economic, socio-political conditions that prevailed at the time. You know, I mean, I look at Motown as being probably the kickstart to the whole emancipation movement of Black America. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, what about Martin Luther? What about this? What about? Hang on a minute. Popular culture will always lead the way. You know, irrespective of what happened in Alabama and Rosa Parks and Luther and Malcolm X and stuff like that. It was having black kids and white kids going to the same dances, growing up in the same neighborhood, listening to the same music, having the same cultural reference points that made a difference to the whole struggle. It didn't start the struggle, but it certainly turned it into something that was more amenable for the powers that be to kind of loosen up the strictures a little bit. And then once they did that, the floodgates opened up. So you saw that in the 70s, they said, well, we're not just going to be happy to be second-class citizens. We're going to be first-class citizens. We're going to take on demand. We're going to do it. And they did it through music, they did it through culture, and they did it through, in some cases, violence. But that's how it happened. And I think these little artifacts kind of, they're just little dots in the constellation of that whole historical universe.
They are. They speak of hope and ambition. These were probably the three people you described who go into a studio. They're pinning their hopes on this being successful. And sadly, but interestingly, a lot of the things that actually are important to the community that we're part of weren't important at the time. They were forgotten, overlooked. They none of them, they weren't all necessarily successful. So there's a tragedy at the heart of this as well, I think.
But you also have then, you know, it's easy to look at the ones who didn't make it, but when you look at the ones who did make it, so for example, you know, Otis Redding, he was a driver, he was a truck driver, car driver, limo driver, ends up being one of the biggest stars on Stax. Martha Reeves was a typist, stenographer or whatever she was. She ended up being an international star. So that was their life without the music was kind of mapped out already in I won't say servile roles, you know, in sort of lower or upper working class type roles that they would never break out of. But the music gave them that expanded their views, expanded their universe for them, and by taking control of their own lives, becoming involved in these things that weren't what their parents did, they went on to better things, and they pushed the next generation on and stuff. And these records, I know I'm probably turning this into something bigger than it should be, but for me, these records are testament to that whole period. So from the blues up to R&B, into soul, into funk, on up then into disco, etc., etc. It's just this branch and this trunk of music, and all these little offshoots that are going on. So they all have their little distinct places, but they're all very, very important.
Yeah, Joe, look, I mean, I don't think you've gone into any directions other than the kind of directions that we need to go into when we're thinking about these things. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Coming along in these strange pandemic times. It's, in many ways, it's actually more interesting talking to people over this new kind of technology, because it's not the same as having a beer and talking about these things. But listen, thank you so much for coming on. And when all this is over, I look forward to actually having a beer with you and picking your brains, because clearly...
You're more than welcome, Barney, and I look forward to that myself, and we'll get back to doing what we do in darkened rooms.
We will.
Playing music, that is.
Whenever that is, I don't know. Thank you very much, Joe.
Have a good one, Barney. Thanks very much. Slán.
Take care of yourself.